What if one stifling summer day, a solitary figure stepped into the dusty streets and danced, not joyfully, not to music, but as though seized by an invisible force? She spun, she twirled, she could not stop. Within days, dozens followed, and in weeks, hundreds of people across Strasbourg, women, men, children, were swept into a terrifying ritual of motion, dancing until collapse, injury, even death. This is not a fairy tale, but a strange chapter in early modern history. Today we journey into the heart of the 1518 Strasbourg Dancing Plague, a phenomenon of compulsion, mystery, belief, and human endurance. But first, if you enjoy these deep dives into history's oddest moments, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because future episodes will bring you more astonishing stories from the past. Before we can understand the dance, we must feel the world in which it erupted. In the years leading up to 1518, Strasbourg, then a free imperial city in the Holy Roman Empire, now in Alsace, France, was under strain. Crop failures had afflicted the countryside. Grain prices soared. The memory of plague, famine, and social distress lingered across Europe as populations struggled to rebuild after repeated epidemics. Disease stalked the region. Syphilis had arrived in Europe and was spreading. Leprosy remained, and periodic bouts of plague still haunted communities. Meanwhile, religious belief saturated daily life. Saints, demons, curses, divine punishment. These were not abstract ideas, but visceral realities. The saint closely associated with dance and epileptic fits, Saint Vitus, was popularly thought to have the power to inflict a dance curse. So when one woman began to dance uncontrollably, the city's imagination was primed to interpret it spiritually as well as medically. The usual date given is July 14th, 1518. On that day, a woman later named Frau Trophia, or Trophia, depending on the manuscript, stepped into a street and began dancing fervently and without apparent reason. She danced for hours, then collapsed, only to rise and continue again. No festival, no music, no obvious provocation. This bizarre behavior alarmed neighbors and passersby. Within days, the strange compulsion spread. Some sources say 30 or more were soon dancing in the streets. By August, city records, sermon notes, and regional chronicles record that around 400 people had been caught in the dancing mania. The dancers appeared in markets, alleys, in guild halls, on bridges, even dragging others into motion. Some continued day and night, refusing to rest, drink, or eat. Though precise daily death figures are uncertain, some contemporaries claimed up to 15 deaths per day at the height of the outbreak, attributed to exhaustion, stroke, or heart failure. One surviving poetic chronicle put it this way: many hundreds in Strasbourg began to dance and hop, women and men in the public market, in alleys and streets, day and night, and many of them ate nothing until at last the sickness left them. And so the city faced the dreadful spectacle, flesh and will pushed to extremes, bodies trembling beyond endurance. How do you halt a dance you cannot stop? Strasbourg's civic and religious leadership scrambled for solutions, some logical by their standards, others desperate. At first, they thought the compulsion might be broken by more dancing. The city designated guild halls and spaces for the afflicted, hired musicians and professional dancers to lead and guide them, hoping they might dance themselves out of the frenzy. Predictably, that backfired. The music and crowd only fueled contagion, and more people joined. Then authorities banned public dance and musical performances, tried to isolate dancers, and removed instruments from the city. When those measures failed, the city turned to faith-based remedies. The flamboyant spiritual logic of the age held that only divine intercession might end a supernatural compulsion. So the city organized to transport the dancers, still dancing, to a chapel of St. Vitus in a nearby shrine on a mountain slope. They divided the dancers into groups, held masses, led them around altars, offered money and prayers, hoping the saints' mercy would break the curse. By early September, the outbreak began to retreat. Whether because of the spiritual intervention or simply exhaustion and fear, dancing gradually ceased and the epidemic faded. Throughout the 16th century, observers tried to explain what they saw. Medieval minds first defaulted to engagement with sin, demonic possession, or divine punishment. The idea, people danced because God or a saint punished them. Sermons warned of moral lapses and indulgence in unseemly dancing. Yet by the time of the outbreak, the intellectual climate was shifting. The Swiss physician Paracelsus, who later documented the event, introduced a fresh perspective. He coined the term chorea lasciva, lustful dance, and argued it was a kind of illness, an interplay of heated humors, imagination, and mental disturbance, rather than purely divine wrath. Modern scholarship tends to interpret the dancing plague as a mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass hysteria or mass behavioral contagion. In environments of extreme stress, communities may manifest physical symptoms without an organic agent. Supporters of this theory note that the pattern fits. It spread socially, like an emotional contagion. It occurred in a context of famine, disease, fear, and religious belief, fertile ground for psychosomatic reactions. It halted when social pressure, exhaustion, or collective fear overwhelmed the momentum. Still, other theories persist. One is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a mold that can infect rye and produce convulsive symptoms, hallucinations, and spasms. Some have speculated that contaminated bread triggered a neurologic reaction. Yet, the ergot theory struggles to explain why the dancing had such specific patterns, how non-bread eaters were affected, and why it stops so abruptly. Most historians treat it as a weaker hypothesis, so the consensus lean is toward psychological and social contagion intersecting with cultural beliefs. Strasbourg's event was not unique. Between the 14th and 17th centuries, Europe saw repeated episodes of dancing mania, called choreomania, St. John's dance, St. Vitus's dance, or simply the dancing plague. The first major recorded outbreak was in 1374, when villagers along the Rhine reportedly danced in agony for days. These episodes often occurred in times of social stress, war, famine, plague, and in regions steeped in beliefs about possession and the supernatural. Yet, by the 17th century, such outbreaks largely disappeared. Why? Some scholars suggest changing medical paradigms, secularization of belief, stronger authoritarian control, or transitions in public health. And psychology diminished popular willingness to interpret mysterious suffering as dance curses. Strasbourg, 1518, remains the most dramatic and final great dance epidemic on record. We often reduce this to figures and theories, but behind every dancer was a human being. Imagine the agony, joints aching, feet blistered, muscles trembling, starvation creeping in, but the body compelled onward. Some sufferers, reportedly stripped naked, threatened those who tried to restrain them, or collapsed mid-step in convulsions. Eyewitness sermons and chronicles express horror, pity, fear. Clerics preached fear of sin. Physicians scribbled about heated blood. The chroniclers recorded that sufferers ignored pleas to rest. The city council minutes described the surreal decision to give dancers band music to lead them, and then ban it later when more joined. One can almost hear the drums, smell the sweat, see bodies slumped in alleys, citizens unsure whether to help or flee. These individual stories mostly survive in fragmentary form: sermons, council records, chronicles. But together they trace a collective trauma, a city bewitched by movement, a people caught between reason and faith. The Dancing Plague of 1518 is a puzzle at the crossroads of medicine, psychology, religion, and human grief. It teaches us that under extreme pressure, communities may produce extraordinary and tragic expressions of suffering. We still don't fully know why some people began, or why others followed, or what exactly broke the compulsion. Was it collective exhaustion, fear of further deaths, spiritual intervention, a spontaneous psychosocial collapse, or a combination? Some modern theories, mass psychogenic illness, offer persuasive frameworks. Others, ergot poisoning, linger in speculative corners. But perhaps the greatest lesson lies not in definitively solving the riddle, but in reminding ourselves how strongly belief, social stress, and human vulnerability combine when crises mount. So, tell me, when you imagine that dancing city, what do you think was really happening in the bodies and minds of those dancers? Would you lean toward psychological contagion, supernatural curse, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's explore together. If you liked this journey into history's stranger corners, hit like, subscribe, and share it with fellow curious minds. Stay tuned. Next time, we'll dive into another mystery from our shared past.